So some of the things that are happening in media, which again is part of your thought process as far as the planning goes. So the trends are focused on digital. So all of the papers have their digital versions. I did a day in the Fairfax newsroom in Sydney, and it is completely bizarre. It looks like an old-fashioned stockbroking floor, the floor of a stockbroking. They're all in a circle around this central area that basically has a whole range of televisions, and you'd see this when you go into the digital versions of the SMH or the Age or something, that the headlines, the stories move and change, and they are moving and changing as people click on them. So every story is rated in real time, and the higher the rating on each story, the higher it moves up. It moves up on the front page, or then it moves up to the second story or the third story, whatever it is. So these newsrooms are so focused on digital, and they're all focused on clicks. It's who's doing what. Whereas in the old days, you'd get a front page, and probably the most senior journalists would get the biggest story, and that'd sit there, and the next day another paper would come out. These things are moving on a day-to-day basis. So that's how stories develop over time, and in quick time. And this is the sort of the next point, sort of the never-ending story. So a journalist will get up, sort of, my family's fascination with a certain English family, the baby news of Harry and Meghan. The first piece of that would have been a line in every media outlet that says she's pregnant, and then the next 5 minutes that they'd be developing, that story. So an issue or crisis story can start with that first line, and this is where it's really important that your organisations are on the front foot and out there communicating your position on the issue, doing the right thing, acknowledging, apologising, and saying what you're doing about it really early, so the story's built from your position and not from someone else's position who's on the spot. Niche audiences, again, this is really quite pertinent for the not-for-profit sector. It's really understanding the journalists who understand your sector, have a certain style about them, and have a certain reach towards the audiences you want to communicate with. Journalists, time poor. So we've got a couple of journalists who work for us, and Sarah would be in her mid-30s. When she was at the Canberra Times, she would write a story, maybe 2 a day. When she left the Canberra Times 5 years later, she was writing 5 stories a day. So they're basically sitting at their desk tuning out stories, whereas previously they were out there talking to people and understanding issues. So a lot of the time the journalists, even though they might have an understanding of your sector, have got 4 other stories to write in the day. So again, there's an opportunity for us there to make sure they have our information, the right information from your organisation's point of view, and then they can write from that point of view. And sometimes from a more proactive point of view, it might be that you say, okay, there's 4 or 5 journalists around the state, or whatever it might be, who we think are sort of understanding of our issues in our sector and that sort of thing. Proactively engage with them, meet with them for coffee, ring them up, have a conversation with them, ask them. I mean, again, I'm sort of going against their time poor, but every now and again they'll agree to catch up. If you can develop relationships directly with those 3 to 5 journalists or whatever it is, if and when an issue comes up, they're more than likely to understand your position, your organisation's position on it, and also, respond in a relatively favourable way. More content, less news. Just sort of talked about that one. So they're under massive amounts of pressure. There's fewer of them and more stories that have to be churned out. And this last point, success is measured on clicks, which is very different to what it used to be not that long ago.